Thank you. So here we are again. Hello, hello, Hunter.
Hi Radha, how are you?
Good, good. So today I thought we could look at something that we call the 8 powers. Have you come across that? I don't know whether you have or not, but anyway, it's actually it's a way that within the Brahma Kumaris we use to develop some very practical spiritual skills, really, and it was it's spiritual powers, which is not riddhi siddhi or anything like that. It's not occult powers, but it's very useful things like the ability to discern, the ability to see clearly and know when you're being deceived and when things are straight. It's the ability to tolerate when you need to tolerate and face when you need to face. And in order to do either of those, you need to know when you need to tolerate and when you need to face. And also the ability to what we call accommodate. So in a sense to be flexible without breaking, without being so flexible that we just become doormats, basically. And it's about the ability to withdraw inwards and, in a sense, come into the safe space. So that act of going from out to in. And so all of these are considered powers, spiritual powers, because sometimes it's put in this way that virtues are like beautiful flowers. So we all need to develop virtues in our lives, because that brings the beauty, that brings the joy, the happiness. It makes our lives truly human, I think. However, because of the kind of times we live in, that there's not just virtues, but there's also weaknesses. So therefore we need what we call spiritual powers, to develop spiritual powers. So, we might have the ability to, the virtue of being peaceful, cool and calm, which is very good and very necessary. But we need, as well as the virtue of being, it's always so nice to be around a cool person who doesn't get ruffled every 2 minutes, basically, or even in big things. But in order to have that capacity, very often what's needed is the power of silence or the power of peace, so that it's, as well as being a virtue, it's also an instrument. So it's also a tool. And you know how within the mythological descriptions, the goddesses are shown with lots of different weapons in their hands, but some of them are actually sitting on something very, very soft, like a lotus or a swan, or some vehicle that seems to be very soft and gentle. And so it's like they are light enough to have developed the virtues, and so they're able to, in a sense, be carried by virtue, because virtues are beautiful and light and yet useful. But in their hands, they have swords and what do you call it, mace, and all sorts of different dangerous looking weapons, And so, of course, the goddesses are not violent. So, in the sense that there's not, although there's all sorts of stories, yeah. But I mean, what I'm looking at is maybe, in essence, what I see, what I understand the symbolism to be, And so in their hands are these instruments which are used to basically transform or destroy the negative energy. So not people, not things, places, situations, ideas, but falsehood. And so basically these spiritual powers, because in fact these goddesses are called Shakti, you know, and that is power, that is spiritual power. And so in a sense it's all memorials of the human soul, of the spirit. And so it's like at this time when there's not just truth and peace and love and so on, but there is also all the opposites that exist. We need to develop these spiritual abilities and capacities in order to stay close to our virtues. You know? Otherwise, it's very easy to be pulled away and pulled in and consumed by the negative energy. So that's the reason why we look at these things. And one of the practices within Raj Yoga is literally the practice of developing virtues and developing spiritual powers. And so I thought that we could look at one picture, and maybe we'll just look at a couple of the powers and we can look at the others the next times. But I just wanted to show you, just to give you an idea what they all are, you know, and a lot of them we often talk about and we've looked at. So it's nothing new in a sense, but it's just interesting to look at it in that way and as something that we each can and have the potential for developing and would probably find very useful in our life as we develop it. But in order to develop it, in order to have those, shall we say, instruments in our hands available, you know, at a moment's thought, we need to understand what they are and we need to be able to know how to use them, like with any instrument, which is, you know, whether it's a screwdriver or a hammer or even a musical instrument or any other kind of tool, which could, I mean, even be computers and telephones and all of these things. We need to learn how to use them to get the best result and to get them to do what we want them to do. You know, so it's useless holding a sword but using the wrong side to, you know, to cut something. And so so we need to know when and how to use that. And the very important thing to remember is that basically we're using them on ourselves. So it's not that we're using it on anyone else, no. But it's on the falsehood or the negative energy, or on being determined and persevering with us developing some important capacity, some useful tool. So I'm gonna share my screen. Let's see if it comes up. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so can you see that? Okay. So just to give an overview at the moment, really, is that these spiritual powers, we need them only when we are interacting with each other and on this physical plane, and when things are not in the best shape, basically, you know, in terms of our society and the quality of our interaction, when basically we need them when there's things like anger and ego and violence and disrespect and misunderstandings, broken relationships, weakness of character. That's when we need these. Because, in fact, it's those very things that we need to help us get strong, to help us come out of any kind of a prison of a mindset, of a delusionment and deception. Because, of course, one of the biggest deceptions that most people are living in is that of the false identity of considering the self to be the physical body. You know? And so this is something that is a practical tool. So we're also looking here in the middle of the picture, where you see the meditator, you know, the white figure basically, which just represents the person who is developing the powers on an internal level first. So what's going on here is that they recognize the need to develop some powers, let's say the power of tolerance, for example. So rather than staying within the sphere of the world and relationships, because that in a sense hasn't done much for the power of tolerance. Maybe over time we learn a few things, but but usually it either takes a very long time or it takes a lot of shaking up for us to really understand and practice tolerance when it's needed. So sometimes we say, okay, well, I'll just tolerate it, when actually we shouldn't be tolerating, because it's not something to tolerate. It's something to face, you know. And so there's a lot of, in a sense, misplacement. Excuse me. And so, oops. And so basically, the within the practice of meditation, the important part is where, if you see this line going up to the supreme, you know, can you see my indication? I hope. Where from the head, basically, there is this little bit more defined line that's going up, and that just represents very simply the connection with the supreme source of spiritual power. And that is really actually what we call Raj Yoga. You know, yoga, connection, union, and Raja is the supreme, and so in this case, or the sovereign, as we know. And so in this case, the supreme soul, so, you know, God, you know, whatever you like to call that being. And so when my connection, the connection of my mind, of my thoughts, of my attention basically, when I'm aware of myself as a spiritual being and I'm making that connection, in a sense I'm becoming aware of the presence. And it's a very subtle presence, but I'm drawing that being. So I'm actively, in a sense, I'm actively inviting the presence of that being into my consciousness, you know, so that I can be in the company of the Supreme. So within religions, it's been considered like, look, this is impossible. Don't even bother doing that. You'll be lucky if you get a little taste of anything to do with the Supreme, but you know, maybe you're too small to ever imagine doing that. But actually, what we understand within Raj Yoga is that, in fact, that's not the case, because we are also remembered as children of the Supreme, you know, which not children in the literal sense, because we're souls and we're eternal, but children in the sense that there is a relationship, there is a very ancient and eternal connection. And so just the fact of this relationship means that we can come close, that we can interact, that we have something to do with each other, me and the Supreme, all souls and the Supreme. And so just with this, to me, it's an indication, okay, well, I need to, you know, come close in order to understand what's going on, I need to just have a conversation, to see what's what really. And so, in order to do that, I need to have some means of communication and some I need to know something about this being. And so we have within Raj Yoga, we receive some information about the Supreme, and that information is very simple, and maybe that information is something that anyway we we also have a little bit mixed up, and maybe in a different way, through our culture and through our different practices. But the information that we receive, that I'm familiar with anyway, is that the Supreme Being is incorporeal, so doesn't have a physical human or any other physical form, is completely benevolent, and so is incapable of doing things like punishing or getting angry. And the third is that the Supreme Being knows everything. And so, therefore, is a very useful person to have a conversation with. Because in that way, I can also get to know certain things, at least about myself, about my context, about why the world is the way it is, and about the Supreme Himself, herself, as there's no body, there's no gender, so you can choose which pronoun you use. Um, and so, in other words, in order to develop these spiritual powers, which we need here in this physical dimension, I need to develop my connection, my yoga with the Supreme, which means I need to think about that being. I need to connect my heart and my intellect with this being. So we're all the time thinking about things and people and tasks and responsibilities. So it's almost like I'm having yoga with all of those things. You know? And so whenever there's yoga or connection, so if I'm connected, if I'm thinking a lot about my work, for example, then it's like I'm having yoga with my work. You know? And there is an exchange of energy. You know? So depending on how I see myself in my job, maybe my energy is drained away, or maybe it's fulfilled, but it's still pretty temporary and limited to what my job or my colleagues can offer me and what I can offer them. And so we still need those connections. It's not that we have to take them away. But the point here is that in order for me to be filled, for me to receive what I need in terms of spiritual power, I need to go to one source. It's useless going to different people or to different situations, because basically they don't have much power. You know, they might be loving and kind and wise to a certain extent, but not enough for what we need. No, because every single human being has a very deep need for spiritual fulfillment. No, which then, when that's not there, then that translates in all sorts of other more physical needs. You know. Whereas, of course, the physical needs will always be there whilst we have a physical body, you know, so we still need to eat and sleep and walk and, you know, and we still have emotional needs. And of course, the thing is that when we have when we receive this spiritual power, then we're able to have clarity and we're able to actually translate that power into what we call these 8 powers. But the first thing that we need to do, therefore, in order to even begin to develop and use these powers, is to draw the power from the Supreme and to use the Supreme Being as my main source of spiritual power, which is also the main source of peace, the main source of love. the main source of fulfillment, of satisfaction, of joy, of bliss. And so anyway, so that's like, in a sense, the first step. So we can talk a lot about these 8 powers, but unless we are at the same time doing this first step of actually drawing power and continuing to do that, then we can understand these powers as much as we like, but we probably won't be able to develop them as much as we would like. So just before we go into looking at maybe a couple of them, does anyone have any questions, or in particular about the connections with the Supreme and what this thing that we call yoga, and the information that we have about the Supreme? In case anyone would like to, please do. Yeah.
Right. Radha, I just want to ask one question. Even if you are not aware that you are in connection with the Supreme Soul, uh, is the benevolence still there coming towards you, which unknowingly is giving you some sort of strength and energy to recognize these things? Or is it that once you actually make the contact and you sense it that you created a contact, then does the thing starts moving?
That's a nice question. Yeah, I mean, I think that because this being is only capable of benevolence, so the benevolence is always there. You know? Because just like a parent wants the best for the child, you know, but until the child recognizes that, yes, this is my parent, this is my father, this is my mother, it's as if for the child, this is just another person, until they recognize, until they have some information. So sometimes there are these stories of this kid that got lost and was separated from the parents, and then after many years was reunited. And so they may not recognize, who is this man in front of me, or this woman. And then when they get the information, yeah, this is my father, then those old memories, the connection of the heart gets joined. And that's when this child or this person will begin to think of this man as my father. And then, even though the father may have known it, and wanted the child to come back, but the child never came. And so now he or she has come, and so both have recognized each other. The parent always knew, but maybe the child didn't know, didn't recognize themselves as this person's child. And so it's like when we recognize ourselves as having this relationship with the Supreme, that's when it becomes active for us. And that's when we begin to experience, that's when it's like you begin to have a right, even a right to call the Supreme into your consciousness and into your awareness. Because we don't need to go into the whole thing, which is a very human way of this submission. We don't want to be submissive to the Supreme, because that's not the kind of relationship that that really, for an incorporeal being beyond, over and above all cultures, it's not necessary and it's not even useful. And so the way I like to think of the Supreme Being is as, yes, this benevolent parent, but also as this friend and companion whom I can just call whenever I want. And because of the relationship that maybe I'm cultivating and maintaining, this being will become present and available. And through the connection will help me to understand things and let go of things, which is actually is what is empowering me. So it's not like this being hands over power and somehow injects it into my consciousness, but it's about, in a sense, when I'm in the presence of this being, something's going on in me in terms of me realizing, recognizing, letting go, um, concentrating in such a way that I become strong and still and stable. And the thing is that we may not necessarily feel the presence. So we don't have to be feeling anything, some sensation in our body or even some feeling in our mind. But it's about a knowing and inviting. And then, yes, then there are experiences. And not every time is it a peak experience where I experience the bliss of the Supreme, which would be nice, but then it's not a peak experience. So, so yes, I think the benevolence is always there.
Thank you, Radha. Question two, Radha. Sorry, just one more stretching on that. So, what is the difference between getting the benevolence when you are knowing it and receiving the same thing when you are not realizing that you're receiving it?
Yes. So I think it's a little bit like when a teacher is teaching you during the year. So you can, the teacher pays full attention to the child and corrects them and is present for them and really takes a lot of care. But when it's the time for the exam, then the teacher steps aside. So even if the teacher sees that, oh, this child is struggling or they're having some difficulty, they won't intervene. And so it can feel like, oh, this teacher is so mean that they're not even, and for example, if the teacher happens to be your dad or your mom, the child would feel that even more, that, well, they could help me. But in fact, that's not the time for example. And so I think there are moments when we're under exam or we're having a test. And so we might be going through things. So something might come up, for example, that is potentially worrying for you. So that's a test. What do you do? Do you worry or do you think of some of the things that you know? Do you create positive thoughts? Do you draw power and love from the Supreme? Whether you feel it or not, do you think about that being and send good wishes to whatever it is you're worrying about? And then afterwards, because maybe you've passed that test very well, then the next time you sit to meditate and the potential for worry is always gone, that's when you probably will have a very sweet and close experience with the Supreme.
Thanks, Radha. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. So, unless there's anything else, we'll just look at maybe one or two, let's see. So, I'm gonna look at this one, which, can you see it? This one, which is a tortoise. Yeah. And so this symbol, this image, represents our ability to come inside, to come into introspection. Just like the tortoise will, I don't know if you've ever seen one, I've seen some, and they're amazing, where they have this sort of big, clumsy kind of shell, and however, as soon as anyone goes near them, they pull inside their head and they pull inside all their limbs. And it looks like you've just got this sort of rounded shell there. And it's a very strong shell so that it protects them and they are completely inside and covered by that. And so that is all symbolic, basically, of an ability that we can develop of coming inside. So, in a sense, withdrawing our attention So withdrawing, it's a little bit like, what one of the images that came up where you wind up the string that's been outside and maybe connected with this and that, and so you wind it up so that you're inside, you're in this safe space, and what you're doing is replenishing your energy. You're in that solitude, in a sense, of your own mind, of your own consciousness, and you are refreshing your energy. So, however, why is it a power? You think, well, it's simple enough, but it's a power because very often there's two things. One is that very often we're spread out, and we're very much, so much involved in what's going on, in issues and people and relationships and things and finances, that we're stuck outside. And we tend to live outside of ourselves. It's like we live as homeless people, in a sense. So we're living out of our safe space. And so we need to come inside to be refreshed, to be connected, to be safe, to be comfortable, to replenish our batteries. So we don't want to be outside for too long. We want to keep coming in, refresh, and then go out again. Come in, refresh, go out again. And this is like, really what's coming in is my attention, the focus of my attention, the refreshing of my intention for what I'm doing. And that is what helps us to keep the connection. Because once I'm in, which means once I'm in the consciousness of who I am, that's when it's possible to make the connection with the Supreme. And to, in a sense, be a little bit detached from all the energies and the influences of everything that's going on. And so this is called the power to withdraw. So the power to withdraw. And so it's that ability to come inside. And then the second thing, so one is that we're kind of often quite stuck outside, and the other thing is developing the ability to do it at will, and as soon as you decide to do it. So, for example, maybe you just had an argument with someone, and you say, okay, I want to relax a bit, I want to become peaceful, I want to let go of all these things, I want to come inside. Now, how quickly are you able to do that? Or how often will you keep getting dragged out of your home and be dragged along the dust, which is a lot of wasteful thoughts and questions, and they shouldn't do this, and you go out there and you have another fist fight with them in your mind, and you shout at them and you say lots of things, and then you come back, oh no, I want to be peaceful, I want to be quiet, come back inside. But then do you stay inside? Can you, in a sense, withdraw all your limbs, which is the action, which is even the action of the mind, and come into your consciousness, which is the place of peace, the place of love? And to do that, it's a power. I mean, it's easier said than done, but to have a certain power means that you have a certain capacity, a certain skill, and these are things that we can develop. So that's one, and maybe we'll just do the second one. Is that okay? Or anyone want to look more at that first one? We can always come back to it. So basically, the second one, you see suitcases and like a traveling kit, basically. And in the old picture, this is a newly redone picture, but in the old picture, it's a trunk and a hold all, And every time I see that, I just think of school and traveling to school on the trains and overnight and managing somehow the trunks and the hold all and everything. But anyway, this power is called the power to pack up. You know. So what this means is that because we're really on a journey, we're moving all the time, we're changing all the time. Time is moving on, we're moving on. So we need to be able to just take with us what we need and to travel light. And so, what is it that we take with us from one day to the next? No? What is it that we're carrying with us on an internal level? So, we carry with us certain attitudes, certain feelings. Sometimes we carry with us certain issues, um, impressions, habits, memories. And so we need to choose, really. We have a choice. This is the thing, is that we can say, look, on this journey, I need to go fast and I want to travel light. I want to enjoy my journey. So this very heavy bori, this tokri, I don't want to take that with me on my head. And so we can put it down and we can let it go. And of course, to let go of something, you need to be detached and say, okay, that idea that I have of certain people, actually, I may be right, but I don't want to keep that with me as the way I see them. I want to be open, I want to be light. And so I let go of grudges, of judgments, of holding on to what they did and didn't do, or should or shouldn't do. And I only take with me what I learned from that situation, for example. So this is the power to pack up. And of course, it's a power because, in a sense, it's literally being able to let go, leave behind, and go from the expansion into the essence. To say, okay, that whole experience was wow, but maybe it was painful in some moments and it was useful in others and great in others, but what is it that I'm actually going to take with me? And then every time the mind goes into some expansion of what happened, what they said, what they did, you can remind yourself that, hold on a second, I've left that behind. And all I want to take with me is the fact that I learned this and this thing from the situation. So we need to know what we're putting in our bags. From one day to the next, from one situation to the next. And so this is the power to back up. So I'm going to stop there in terms of this picture for now, and we can look at the rest another time. But I thought we could have a meditation. But before that, any thoughts, any comments from anyone? So, okay. Okay, so then let's have a meditation. And since I don't have I have a different background today, so I'm going to put this so that you can use that for your meditation. Okay, so I'm going to find a comfortable position and allow your body to relax. Take a deep breath. And make sure that if there's any tension anywhere, you can let go of that. Giving permission to the body, to the muscles, to be relaxed and comfortable. And so as I focus my attention on what's going on inside, in my inner world, I'm at the same time withdrawing my attention from the physical dimension of time and space, people and places, tasks and issues. And to withdraw means to open up my hand and let go. So I watch myself opening my hands again and again, everywhere that I may be holding on. I open my hand and I feel myself being drawn inwards. Because in fact, our natural position is to be inside, to live from our home and to look out into the world, not to live outside and to occasionally look in. And so I bring myself with a lot of determination and love into my inner space that is only mine, the only thing that I can truly say, this belongs to me. For everything and everyone else, I am a trustee. I do not own anything, including the body, because one day I receive it, and another day I will not have it anymore. And so as I become comfortable in my inner space, I can visualize it as I wish. Somewhere that I can sit down inside and position myself with ease in a relaxed and natural way. I don't need to pretend anything. I don't need to show anything. There's only me in here. And as I relax my mind, I become aware of all the different energies, the things I've accumulated in the form of influences, impressions, memories, attitudes, and many, many other subtle objects. And I begin to see very clearly what I need and what is superfluous. What is it that I can carry with me? And what is it that I can let go of? Maybe an old memory that absorbs a lot of light. I can look at that and decide if I really need it. And so as I observe my inner space, I feel myself settling down. And the energy, the coolness of peace and quiet becomes tangible. And it is from here that I can invoke and invite the supreme energy, the source of powerful peace, where peace has no limits, where the abundance is infinite. And I simply enjoy the presence of this being, absorbing the light and the power. I don't need to do anything, just be in the presence. And allow the spiritual magnetic energy to realign me as needed. And this inner space of my consciousness becomes filled with light, not a physical light, but a vibration of lightness. And I sense the gratitude and the energy that has filled my being. And I take another deep breath. And very gently guide my attention to my physical body, to my physical surroundings. Knowing that my place of functioning is inside. And when my consciousness is connected to my being, when I'm aware of who I am, that's when the virtues and the spiritual powers become available in my interactions. Shanti. Thank you. So, if there's anything anyone would like to share from the meditation or from what we discussed, please do.
Thank you so much, Radha. Just a small request, if we could carry on with the remaining 6 virtues also. It's a very interesting one. Thank you so much.
Definitely. We will definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, Radha. Bye. Take care.
Me too, Abhijit. Thank you.
Hi, Radha.
Thank you, Radha. Thank you, Sal.
Hello.
Thanks a lot, Radha. The girls are also enjoying the meditation and they are peacefully sitting and listening to you.
Wow, that's great.
And they are really enjoying it every day. Every time we join, 1 minute.
Radha, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ravina. Thank you.
Radha, you are enjoying.
Great. I'm glad. I'm happy about that.
Thank you, Radha. Bye-bye.
Aman
Bye.
has been watching the meeting. I want to show you something.
Aman,
Welcome,
do
Mr.
you want to say
Batra.
something? Yeah.
Aman is going to say something, Radha.
Yes,
Sorry.
please. Aman.
He's run away, yaar. Lakhe.
He's gone, he's gone.
Okay.
I think he sensed it.
हाँ, राधा मुझे टॉपिक्स भेज देना अनुराग.
Yeah, okay. Any suggestions? You can tell me.
Lakhe, nothing worked out today.